Bienvenidos a Honduras. My name is Angelica Abrego, and I will be your guide for this tour. Honduras is a beautiful country that has a little bit of everything. We have a wide range of geography, history, landmarks, people of all races, and developing tourist destinations like this place right here. We will touch more on it later, but Roatán is a developing tourist destination that is filled with hidden gems, such as the crystalline beaches and plant diversity. During this tour, we will talk about general facts of the country, the culture, which includes lots and lots of food, and dancing, of course. Like every country, the beauty is unfortunately hidden due to poverty and the effects of poor infrastructure that affect our citizens. We will discuss that further into the tour. The Honduran flag contains 2 blue stripes and 5 stars. The blue stripes represent the Caribbean Sea on one side and the Pacific on the other, and the stars represent the 5 Central American countries. The struggle for land and access to health care makes it very difficult for citizens to enjoy of the beauty that is this country. But we will get to that eventually. Let's start off with an overview of Honduras. Honduras is located in the middle of Central America, bordered by Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. Honduras was part of the southern tip of Mayan civilization, but unfortunately collapsed, and then in the 16th century the land was invaded by the Spanish along with their colonial rule. The Lenca people resisted but fell short, and their chief Lempira was murdered by the Spaniards. The country declared independence in 1821 through the Act of Independence. This was a public decision made alongside other Central American countries as part of a joint declaration of independence from Spain. As of 2018, this country is home to nearly 9.5 million inhabitants. Among these, there are people from a multitude of races and ethnic groups. There are Europeans, indigenous and Afro-descendant groups such as the Lenca, Garifuna, Miskito, Tolupan, Nahua, Chorti, Pech, and Tawaka people. But the majority of us are just a big mix of everything, and it most definitely shows in our culture. The capital of Honduras is Tegucigalpa, within the department of Francisco Morazan. Just like the U.S. runs on states, Honduras runs on a similar system. There are 18 departments, with Olancho being the largest in terms of surface area, and Francisco Morazan the largest in terms of population. Honduras has a wide range of terrains and climate regions. The climate patterns are those exhibited in temperate and tropical climates, but with varying temperature ranges. In the mountainous regions, the temperature is much cooler, with a range of 61 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Towards the region on the north side of the country, it is very hot, with dry, strong heat from the sun. As far as topography, there is an extensive interior highland and the narrow coastline areas that house the beaches. Within the mountainous range, the highest mountain is famously known as Cerro Las Minas. Apart from the mountains, there is a lot of diversity in terms of terrain. There are mangroves, tropical broadleaf forests, tropical and subtropical coniferous forests, and tropical coastal rivers. The Bay Islands versus the mainland. The Bay Islands are found off the north coast of Honduras and consist of the islands Roatán, Utila, and Granaja. While the mainland ranges in its temperatures and climates, the Bay Islands all exhibit tropical climates, with high temperatures exhibited year-round. It is because of this that the Bay Islands have been coming up as an up-and-coming tourist destination. The islands house the Great Mesoamerican Barrier Reef that is world-renowned for its beautiful coral and marine diversity, clearly seen through the crystalline waters. This picture was actually taken by me on my summer cruise to Roatán. Food is a big part of Honduran culture because it allows family to come together and experience the true mix of cultures. This is known as sopa de res, which includes oxtail, plantains, yuca, and other ingredients, but these are some of the ingredients common in other Caribbean nations, such as Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Jamaica. Baleadas are a common Honduran dish made from flour tortillas, refried beans, crema, and queso. Beans and tortillas are a common staple in the majority of Honduran dishes, and fish is very common around Easter, but is more of a nice planned meal. Many of the famous dishes here are made of staple household foods because the majority of inhabitants live under the poverty line and buy what they can afford. This is the reason why beans and tortillas are such a common part of every meal. Punta is a traditional dance that comes from the Garifunas and is embedded into the culture. The Garifunas are Afro-Caribbean people who reside on the Bay Islands of Honduras and settled in the 17th century, inhabiting most of the islands. Garifunas have their own culture that is unique to Honduras, and not one many fellow Hondurans accept or associate with. Hondurans have historically been known to, quote-unquote, whiten the country by only adhering to the side of history associated with mestizaje. This means that they accept their indigenous and European ancestors, but refuse to accept African ancestors, which in turn creates discrimination among Afro-Latinos. Despite this, the traditional Garifuna dance has been infused into mainstream culture, where it is common for everyone to know and love the dance. The historical principles of Punta are being overcome by modern culture and the incorporation of modern Punta, such as Punta Rock, but the best that they can do in a society that is picking and choosing what they accept and deny as their history is to try and educate and explain the history of each particular detail. Like I mentioned earlier, the beauty of the country is very much hidden behind the poverty. With the unpaved mud streets and unstable homes, similar to the Brazilian favelas, it is clear that the uneven distribution of resources among all regions and all people leave the majority living in the bare minimum to survive. 62.8% of the population lives in poverty. The lack of resources cause the people to make do with what they find, and houses are made of whatever is available, including hurricane shutters and old wooden planks. The inhabitants of these homes are known as squatters because their homes are built on land that is either unowned or just does not belong to them. This is common in every part of the country and is the primary route of obtaining land. The lack of even distribution and the favoring of small percentage of citizens with a high socioeconomic status leaves others with no choice. The invasion of squatters on unowned land or unused land owned by a wealthy landowner has gone through high and low periods in Honduras. Squatter invasions are most seen when the poor are trying to obtain agricultural land to farm, and it became the primary route in receiving that land throughout the 1970s. In the early 1970s, Honduran government attempted to address this problem by promoting agrarian reforms and dividing 120,000 hectares among 35,000 poor families. But the 1975 conditions for the poor had returned to pre-agrarian reform, and the squatter invasions once again rose. Due to land tenancy laws placed by the National Agrarian Institute, after 10 years of living on and cultivating the land invaded, squatters are granted legal title of the land they occupy once they apply for it. The land is not being used to the best of its ability, so by the squatters taking it to generate crops, it in turn turns it to something profitable. Using the squatter method has its risks when wealthy landowners come to know that their land is being inhabited without their consent and land seizure disputes arise. Though the case for many squatters is that the owners come to realize how expensive legal costs will be for a small section of their land and drop the case. Access, or lack thereof, of healthcare in Honduras is a major topic that needs to be addressed. Honduras is the second poorest country in Central America, with 9 out of 10 people having no health insurance. Of those that attempt to receive aid from the healthcare system, it is divided into the public sector and the private sector that includes the nonprofit organizations. While a system is in place, it still favors those with optimal socioeconomic status, and based on the poverty statistic, it can be said that the majority does not have health insurance, or any health services for that matter. 18% of the population does not have access to any health services. Running water and adequate nutrients is not a right nor something that is readily available, and access to health care is a major issue to add to the list. The country chooses to place the few resources in large and profitable cities, leaving nothing to the majority that live in the villages. This, in turn, leaves the country in a state of emergency with respect to its citizens. Honduras' climate and lack of preventative measures creates a breeding ground for epidemics. Infectious and parasitic diseases such as malaria, typhoid, Zika, among many more, attack the population and create the leading cause of death in a situation that could otherwise be controlled. Healthcare in Honduras works by dividing it into 2 subdivisions: The first is the public division, which controls the guidance and provisions of healthcare services from employees and workers. The second division is private and funded by profit and nonprofit organization, but only accounts for 10% of aid in the total healthcare system, leaving the rural population with none of its benefits. To make matters even harder for the majority of citizens, there is a large shortage of physicians in the country. According to the World Health Organization, 232 healthcare workers per 10,000 population will allow for adequate coverage. In Honduras, there are 0.37 physicians per 1,000 population, further inhibiting individuals from obtaining the necessary care for basic survival. Overall, this presentation taught me so much about a country I thought I knew so much about. I knew what I was exposed to, which was where my family lives, in Juticalpa, Olancho, and the influence of the culture within my home and family. I came to discover the hidden beauties such as the Copan ruins, the beautiful nature like waterfalls and beaches, and the traditions and folklore and customs in a country where all that is emphasized and seen from the outside is that it is dirty, poor, and violent. I was also exposed to the parts that really need to be addressed in the government. The few resources are being allocated only to the few that can contribute fiscally to the government in regions that have the potential to generate profit for the country and are leaving the other citizens with scraps. Going to Honduras, there was almost never running water, but my family is fortunate enough to have a rain-catching system where we collect and clean the rainwater, then place garbage bins of water in the bathrooms to shower and the kitchens to cook and clean. Others do not have this luxury, which should be a given right if the government is going to decide to send us basic needs such as water to rich, concentrated regions. Many times throughout the day, one will hear talk of the necessities that citizens are lacking and the impact on their lives, but their voices are not loud enough nor important enough to be heard by the high government officials, according to these officials. Although this presentation exposed me to the good and bad of the country, I still have a newfound appreciation for this country. In conjunction with what I learned throughout the semester through this class, there was so much that I have to appreciate and to teach others, such as the breaking down of the racial barriers of Latinx individuals, not wanting to accept that many of us are Black and have Afro descent. The racial discussion allowed me to educate my Honduran family and hopefully break down future barriers. There is so much more to be done, but also so much to appreciate. Viva Honduras!